The Collector has arrived as part of the latest patch for Darkest Dungeon 2, version 1.0.1, The Surgeon's Table. I just came off a 8-hour live stream searching for all the new goodies, and it's time for us to take a moment to talk about what exactly is in this latest free update to Darkest Dungeon 2. So without further ado, let's get into the overview. There are 2 new bosses, the first of which is the Collector, who is reprising his role from Darkest Dungeon 1. I did not manage to find him on my first day of streaming, but we will continue to look for him, and the presumption is that fight will be a lot like the Darkest Dungeon 1 fight. From those in my audience who have encountered him, they said that it is a tough fight with some very interesting mechanics and some fun, if situational, rewards. The second boss that was added is the Gaunt Surgeon. The Gaunt Surgeon is a new enemy that, rather than being wandering like the Collector, will be found in a very specific place, specifically Surgeon's Table nodes scattered across the map. It is a 2-wave fight, much like the Creature Den. The second wave includes the Gaunt Surgeon. The fight is very disease heavy, both in terms of curing diseases quickly, but also giving you diseases. I'll talk more about that when we get to that section. There are also 5 new elite variants of mobs. So imagine this as mobs we already have, but reskinned with a slightly different moveset. They feel very similar to their original versions, but slightly more scary, slightly more difficult. Then there is the Infernal Flame rework. This got a pretty massive overhaul. I think this is overhaul number 3 for the Infernal Flame. But there are some very interesting and exciting things, including a throwback to Pitch Black Dungeon, I believe, which I'm very excited for. And then last but not least, they added gamepad and Steam Deck support. So exciting news for the future of potential console releases, but also in the meantime, those who are playing it on Steam Deck now have fully certified support, I believe. So without further ado, let's start out with a statement that Red Hook made at the beginning of the patch notes. They said, "Our team is excited for everyone to experience the first of many updates we have planned for Darkest Dungeon 2. But we have grand plans for the road ahead. As mentioned before, we are steadily working towards hero origin skins, mod support, and other quality of life improvements. Additionally, we are also focusing on new features that will help improve some of the areas that receive the most lukewarm or negative feedback. Specifically, we want to continue to improve the sense of agency and dynamism, reduce some areas of RNG, plus add more variety and replayability. We look forward to sharing details with you as these features approach completion. We love this game, and we will continue to keep making it better and better. Thanks for your support." So a few things just to mention here. I think they hit most of the pending items that they previously had on the roadmap. Hero origin skins. Mod support was never on the roadmap, but it's great to hear that it's on the list. And then quality of life improvements we always expect from them. I like that they mention the sense of agency and dynamism. One of the things that I really struggle with in Darkest Dungeon 2 right now is some of the difficult to manage aspects of the game, one of them being Torchlight. They overhauled the Infernal Torch system, but I think that players need more agency around the amount of torch that they have so that we can choose to do dark runs or things that are similar to that, like we were able to do in the first game. The reason for this is there's some really cool trinkets that you can only use on low torch, but in this game, you kind of run out of torch and then explode in a fiery ball rather than just going pitch black and things getting scary. And then, of course, variety and replayability are welcome additions. One thing they didn't mention here, but we believe is somewhere in the future potentially, is additional classes. Would love to see many of the classes from the first game return as the game continues to expand. But anyways, that's their future-looking statement. Now we'll move on to more of the point by point. So first they have a general section where they talk about the controller support. I'm not going to dwell on that too much. Additionally, full Steam Deck support. They did retool the visuals for Oblivion's Ingress. They look nice now. They're kind of like evil teepees is the way that I would describe them. And then I definitely noticed performance optimizations, especially in the Tangle. The Tangle sometimes got a little laggy for me and my computer's pretty beefy. So it was nice to see that the Tangle is running very smooth. The game in general feels a lot more snappy. They don't mention it here, but they've continued to tighten up the animations, tighten up some of the scene transitions. Everything seems to jump in very quickly. You move through things very fluidly. The game plays very quick. As for combat, they've done a bit of a cleanup pass here, for lack of a better description. So end of round actions have been adjusted so that now they actually show up at the end of the round. You'll get an additional little icon for the enemy if they're going to do something, and that will kind of like be a bit more communicative for new players, because you're not going to have random enemies doing random things at random times. So first off, they say that monsters will receive a bonus action at the end of the round and is now reflected in the initiative order. We already covered that. Monsters that receive a bonus action at the end of the round will now display the appropriate number of action pips. Also very nice. So that's the action pips are the things below the enemy. So we didn't fight the Leviathan today, but I presume the Leviathan is no longer going to have one pip underneath them because they have a bunch of bonus actions. And then depending on the changing battle circumstances, these actions may be added or removed. The turn order is now dynamic, which is really nice because it means that you know if you've done something to create an additional action. And these bonus actions are still not subject to the standard turn rules, such as dot ticks. So this is the same thing for Encore. If you Encore a player hero, they don't take an additional tick of dot damage. These are bonus actions. They behave separately. It would be nice if there was a visual indicator of bonus actions versus regular actions in the turn order. That would be really cool. Maybe they can make them like blue outlined or something like that. But anyways, I digress. That's the combat changes. Moving on to monsters, this update was very focused on monsters. So there's a lot of changes here relating to the monsters. Most of them revolve around this kind of like common theme of the elite variants that they've added. So Collector has been added. We already knew that. The Gaunt Surgeon has been added to the game and can be found at the Surgeon's table. They've added and removed some mashes. I don't think we saw any that were particularly new and different during this particular run, but apparently they've added 60 of them, which is really nice. Champions will no longer spawn during wave 1 of lair encounters, which means you're never going to get like double knight on your way to the general, which I think is a really nice change. That was frustrating when it happened. They increased the appearance rate of champions in wave 2, so you're going to be seeing like one tough fight before you get to the general. And then increased the rate of champions at resistance encounters. So you're going to see more knights, more skeevers, etc. when you go to resistance encounters. Champions now have a small chance of appearing at Region 3 resistance encounters in Confession 4 and above. I don't think I saw this in my run, but interesting observation. And then champions now always have at least a small chance of appearing in the Sluice in Confession 4, which I thought was an interesting one. I'm not sure if this means that the Sluice can now borrow champions from other regions, but we'll have to wait and see. As for the cultists, worship got a pretty major overhaul, so it's no longer a free action. As a result, it is now a bit stronger, so it heals 30% rather than 20%. The altar worship now grants the target either block, dodge, or strength, with block being a favorite in the early confessions. The cherub worship now grants dodge or dodge plus. The evangelist worship now is block or block plus. The herald worship now steals negative tokens, up to 2 at Confession 3 and beyond. The Herald worship is no longer moves the Herald back. No longer moves the Herald back 1 rank, which is an interesting one. I didn't remember that was the case, but I don't let them go off that often. And then the Deacon Exaltation can now target rank 2, and the Cardinal's Exaltation damage range is increased from 4 to 10 to 6 to 10, which is a little spooky. Seeing that minimum damage range go up is a little scary because the Cardinal Exaltation is pretty punishing when you let it go off. As a side note, if you weren't aware, the Exaltation happens when either a Deacon or a Cardinal reaches 2 worship, and they get that worship generally by being worshipped. So if 2 enemies worship a Cardinal, then the Cardinal is enabled to do Exaltation, as an example. Moving on to our favorite fiery foes, the Fanatics. There is a new champion. It is a champion version of the Whipper. And you'll see a trend here. Generally, they also make some slight changes, but the Whipper's Whip Crack and Whip Trip can now apply combo when a champion is present, even if the Whipper has not ignited. So you'll be seeing a bit more combo in the Her Ladyship event. That's the champion they're referring to there. And then the Blind Shaman Ignited's Burning Beads is now usable in ranks 3 and 4 instead of 1, 2, and 3, fixing an issue where they would pass perpetually. Seems like a good fix. The Fisherman, there's a new champion. It is a version of the Captain, and then they're going to make a change to the Captain. The Captain fixed an issue where bleed damage dealt by Coral Grief buffs was unaffected by modifiers to the dot duration and potency. So that will make the Captain a little more scary. The Leviathan, they also fixed an issue where Call of the Deep tokens would remain on a hero after they were freed from Undertow. Interesting. And finally, fix an issue where bleed from Barnacle tokens is unaffected by dot modifiers. So we might be getting a little more bleed from Barnacle in the future. On to the Lost Battalion. A new champion, the Knight, has joined the Lost Battalion. The Knight fixed an issue where Deathblow resist was higher than intended. It is still very high. I think the Knight starts at 85 Deathblow resistance, which is nothing to sneeze at. And then Pillagers remove several incomplete Pillager mashes. Speaking of these elites, I wanted to bring one up. This was my first encounter with the Elite Knight, as an example. You can see, just blinged out to the nines, looking real sharp. The moveset is not radically different than their non-elite variety, from what I could see. My guess is they have one additional ability, but generally speaking, I don't let them hang around a super long time to find out. So I don't think I've seen anything abnormal from them, except that they are slightly higher hit points and slightly nastier. Moving on to the Plague Eaters, the new champion is a Butcher, which are the guys with the meat cleavers. And then Livestock, which is the Butcher's buff, now goes away as soon as the Butcher dies. So Livestock can be cast on maids. It can be cast on the goats as examples, and each of them get a unique buff. The goats get 50% extra damage, and then the maids get a speed resist. And then Black Phillip got slightly more HP and speed values, which I think is a good thing because Black Phillip was relatively easy to kill and generally died very quickly. Moving on to the Swine, their new champion is the Skeever. The Skeever's Spit Roast knockback effect was reduced from 3 to 2, and then Skulker and this one is no longer used if any hero has combo. So if you can get someone with combo and then add taunt, you're kind of protected from combo moving forward. And the Skulkers and this one can now be used when either champion is present. So presumably they will be using it both when Wilbur is present or when just a Brute is present. The Gaunt's champion is obviously the Surgeon, but that is located only at the Surgeon's table. And they removed several Gaunt mashes. We'll talk a bit more about the Surgeon in a second. Then we have the Shambler can now correctly spawn in low light conditions at Pillager Road barricades. I guess there was something blocking that for a while. Interesting, hadn't seen it myself, but good to know. So this is the Surgeon's table. It is delightful. You can see there's kind of like an eviscerated corpse sitting on top of a stone slab and leeches everywhere. This is what the fight looks like. The fight is actually 2 phases, kind of like Creature Dens. So in phase 1, you're going to have some number of these leeched up Gaunt. Those are the ones in the front, 2 ranks there. There'll be some of them in the first wave likely, and then some of them in the second wave. And then you have the Surgeon in the back, who's this kind of like scary, lanky guy type of thing, who happens to be wearing the spiked skull cap. The Gaunt Surgeon has 75 HP, but does a fair amount of healing. He has low dot resist, but high stun and debuff resist. He seems to have a unique buff for each mob that he fights with, and he fights with all the Gaunt. So we're talking everything from ghouls to the shadowy assassin guys to these guys with the leeches on them, etc. And what you generally see is the leeched Gaunt generally are giving you a lot of disease, And then the surgeon has a stress attack that removes those diseases. So if you manipulate the fight well and you kill the leeched enemies first, then you're going to be able to get your diseases cured, although albeit at a high cost of stress. One fun little detail, when the Gaunt Surgeon is on death's door, it's kind of adorable. It's kind of like kneeling down, searching on the floor and picking up leeches and putting them in the barrel. It's kind of a cool thing. It's a neat fight. It's very well designed. If you're unfamiliar, this was done as part of a Make-A-Wish Foundation wish that Red Hook did for a super fan of Darkest Dungeon 2. They worked with them to design this particular enemy, and it's really cool. I think they did a beautiful job, and they've showcased it really nicely. Moving on, they made one minor change to the Confession 5 boss that now has a Haymaker, but also a Wild Haymaker. Wild Haymaker is the, I think, non-combo version that just hits someone random, and it now is named differently. Moving on to items, there are several new items that have been added to the game. I don't know all of them at this point, but the Spiked Skull Cap and the Apron are now both, I believe, exclusively available at the Surgeon. You may still be able to buy them at the hospital as well. Yeah, the Appalling Apron, Spiked Skull Cap, and Leeches and Bone Saw will now only be found at the Surgeon's table. Okay, I wasn't sure if it was only or not. Should have read. Go figure. The Appalling Apron and Spiked Skull Cap are now unlocked by default, and they increase the chances for the bounty hunter to spawn with his unique trinkets. That last one is great because there was otherwise no real way to get access to those trinkets. So now most of the time when you get the bounty hunter, you'll probably get one of the trinkets that he comes with, which is pretty cool. Next up, Infernal Flames. The Infernal Flame has been updated to provide new and unique challenges for you to face during your run. When equipping an Infernal Flame, the effects of the flame level becomes overwritten with different modifiers provided by the Infernal Flame along with other unique modifiers. So we're going to take a moment to go through all of them. So the first one that you unlock is the Despairing Flame, and this is damaging to your positive relationships. It, I believe it increases flame drain, but, or actually no, it slows down flame drain. That's why it's yellow, but it reduces your max flame to 50. This is interesting because it helps out a little bit with enabling some of those dark trinkets that we were talking about. But then the next part is when you have this flame equipped, your heroes will gain crit when the flame is high. And when the flame is low, the enemies will gain crit and advantage chance. And if you get a meltdown, you'll get negative tokens, is basically the idea. So that's the way to read that. Basically, there's going to be some continuum of things. It will be good for the heroes or good for the enemies otherwise. The next is the Corpse Light. I think this one is super cool. Actually, I'm really excited to play with this one. But what this does is there are no safe routes. Enemies have round end corpses transform into carrion eaters 66% of the time. So this is a bit of a throwback to Pitch Black Dungeon. If you're familiar with that mod, it was made by Maester Silvio, who now works at Red Hook. And this very much gives me the same vibes as that particular amazing overhaul mod. If you haven't tried out Pitch Black Dungeon for the original Darkest Dungeon, highly recommend it. But this one is going to give your heroes speed, and when it gets dark, they're going to lose resistance to dots, and the enemies are going to gain resistance to dots at low torch or at high torch, and on resist are going to gain positive tokens. These are sometimes a little hard to read still. It's a little tricky. Next up, we have the Doom Candle, which I believe is the third one. This is going to be more Traveling Flame Drain, less Loathing Maximum, a higher base default Loathing. So you're going to be in this very narrow band where you only get 3 pips and you start with 1. And then at various flame levels, heroes are going to gain debuff Piercing, and at combat start are going to gain negative tokens. Or when it's dark, they're going to lose. The enemies are going to have an easier time debuffing you, and at combat start, they're going to gain positive tokens. So Doom Candle seems like kind of a tricky one. I feel like there's going to be a lot of random blinds showing up on that gain negative tokens piece, but we'll have to wait and see. Then we have the Hateful Pyre, number 4. This is no travel healing, no healing between fights in the lair. And then when you're high on torch, heroes gain damage and heal less, and enemies gain damage and apply knockback on low torch. So again, these are hard to read. I think Red Hook needs to reconsider how they're going to articulate what these do, but they're very interesting dynamics. And then last but not least, we use this one on stream today because it has a particular line here that says champion enemies have an increased chance to appear and will appear in all regions. So we went ahead and tossed this one on just because we wanted to see. It did not have a huge difference, but the 33% positive relationship chance reduction is, you really feel it significantly. The flame drain, a little bit less so. The enemy death's door being a little higher is a little tricky. And then when your torch is high, your relics and baubles are significantly boosted. And when torch is low, enemies gain damage, speed, and advantage chance. We noticed a lot of advantage chance. And by the end of this run, I think we had like 230 or maybe even 300 relics. So it's not messing around. We kept our torch relatively high. We made a pretty penny off of it. As for flame levels, they say that the flame level effects now properly change based on the confession, and the range of flame levels has been reduced from 7 to 5. So now there's basically 20% increments, whereas previously there were 7 and they were like 15%-ish kind of with a 0 and a 1. Previous default flame levels used for all confessions. So what does this look like? So this is the way it used to be. So it used to be a range from 100 to 81, 80 to 61, 60 to 41, 40 to 21, 20 to 2, and there was 1 and 0. And those were, we don't really need to talk about those, but that's the way it used to be. The new version is this here. So now there are 5 sections. There's 4 25% sections, right? 100 through 76, 75 through 51, 50 through 26, and 25 through 1. And there is 0, which is pitch black. And much like before, they've just kind of tweaked things, but basically the short version is by default with no Stygian torch or, no other infernal flame active. It's 6% death blow resist on the top end, all the way down to -6 on the bottom. So it's like a 12 range there. And then you have starting blind for the enemies, so on and so forth. But basically they've simplified the system. I think this feels good. I'd like to see something like this matrix as the way that they explain what each of the torches do. Like, how do you consolidate this down into a tooltip that people can actually read? Not sure, but it would be very nice to see it. All right, they also modified the Death's Head trinkets. I'm not going to go into this in a lot of detail. The short version is now they trigger when you enter Death's Door and when you leave Death's Door, which I think is pretty cool. It makes them a little bit stronger, makes the danger a little bit less. And then last but not least, the version of the Death's Head trinket that increases damage when you're on Death's Door now also increases crit by 25%. As for Stagecoach items, they renamed the ones that conflicted or collided with the Surgeon name that is now for the Gaunt Surgeon. So you now have the operating table, and the Surgeon's directory now also helps you find Surgeon's table locations. One change that it was interesting to see chat kind of be of two minds about is the pet change. So now all pets are available in the Valley Inn. So you can pick whatever pet you want to customize your run. Whereas previously you would get 3 and you would have to choose from 1. I, too, am a little of two minds about it. I miss being forced to try pets that I usually wouldn't try, but it's also nice when you're going for a specific run to be able to have a specific pet. So I see why they changed it. I think it would be nice if you could have like a randomize button that you could click that would build out your cart, maybe with a pet or maybe with an infernal torch, and then you have to kind of work around it. As for fixes, they made some general improvements to the region modifiers, being more accurate to their stated effects. Lots of string fixes, as always. Trophy slot tooltip is a little better at explaining that you don't need a trophy for denial. Fix for various achievements not unlocking correctly, notably the Grand Slam. We didn't have that problem. Our Grand Slam unlocked during our last stream before this one, so that was nice. Improved hero goals and field hospital generating conditions when encountering Blood Run. Blood Run is the one that I think removes all field hospitals. Can't remember entirely. And then some changes to road barricades, but the short version is the last thing to talk about here is a known issue, which also gives us a chance to talk about one of the new items that comes from the Gaunt Surgeon. So the Orbitoclast, I don't know exactly how you pronounce that, says it removes a negative quirk for minus 10% max HP. It actually removes all negative quirks, which is pretty cool. The thing that I don't know the answer to, that at some point we will decide to science, is the minus 10% max HP does not have the standard disclaimer of until next in, which I presume means that it is permanent. And I don't know if it is permanent on a particular run or if it is permanent to that hero forever, since the negative quirk removal travels over to the next section. So we'll have to do some science and figure that out. But this is a scary item to use in a context where it lasts just for the run, and a terrifying item if over time you can whittle all of your heroes down to no HP. But that's it. Those are the patch notes. Nothing more to talk about. We had a great time playing this on stream. We'll be back playing it a week from today. When you see this, if you see this when it goes live. And yeah, overall, I think it's a really fun thing. I'm excited to see what the collector is all about. Very interested in checking them out. We still have more elites to hunt down. I was kind of hoping that we might see a trinket associated with each of the elites. But they're really just more of like a reskin with some light modifications. Still very cool. Overall, this feels like a really nice update to the game. If you enjoy videos like this, please toss me a like and hit that subscribe button, so as there is more to talk about, my videos will show up in your feed. But for now, that's going to be it for me. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.